The painters were rolling white primer over Sophie's glow-in-the-dark stars when I turned into my driveway. I could see it through the bedroom window, two men in splattered overalls, systematically erasing the tiny constellations my daughter had pressed onto the ceiling one star at a time during her last good week. My mother-in-law's silver Lexus sat in my spot, angled carelessly across the driveway like she owned the place. I sat in my car for a full minute, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, the grief counselor's words still echoing in my head. Healing isn't linear, Rachel. Give yourself permission to feel. Well, I was feeling something all right. I was feeling a kind of cold, focused rage I didn't know I was capable of. Diane was in the kitchen when I walked in, pouring herself coffee from my machine, using my favorite mug, the one Sophie had painted at Color Me Mine for Mother's Day. She'd written "Best Mom Ever" in wobbly 7-year-old letters, and Diane was drinking Earl Grey out of it like it was a gas station cup. "Oh, Rachel, you're back early." She glanced at the clock. "I thought your little therapy session went until 4. It ended at 3 today. What's happening upstairs?" "I was going to tell you tonight. Over dinner." She smiled. The kind of smile people use when they've already made a decision and are simply informing you of it. "Kevin and Amanda need a room for Olivia. The renovation on their place won't be done until March. And I told them Sophie's room was just sitting empty. Sophie's room was just sitting empty. Like my daughter's sanctuary was a storage unit waiting for a tenant. Kevin is moving into my house? Don't be dramatic. They're staying a few months. Amanda can't handle a toddler in that cramped apartment Kevin's been renting. And the poor thing needs space to crawl around. Olivia's almost walking, you know." She said this last part with a brightness that made my stomach turn. She'd never once used that tone, talking about Sophie. I set my purse down very carefully. "Where is Marcus?" "Your husband is at the office, where he should be. Someone has to keep this family running." She took another sip from Sophie's mug. "I've already had the painters start on the room. That dark blue was so depressing, and the sticky stars on the ceiling were a mess. We're doing it in a nice soft yellow. Gender neutral. Cheerful. Those stars. Sophie had begged us to put them up during her second round of chemo. She'd lost most of her hair by then, and couldn't go outside much, so Marcus carried her on his shoulders around the room, letting her press each glow-in-the-dark star exactly where she wanted it. They'd spent an entire Saturday afternoon building her own galaxy. Orion's belt was crooked because she couldn't quite reach, and Marcus had said, "That's not crooked, Soph. That's artistic." She died 11 weeks later. Those stars were the last project she ever finished. "You need to stop the painters," I said. "Rachel, it's been 8 months. I need you to stop the painters right now. The room is just collecting dust. It's not healthy. Kevin and Amanda need. Kevin and Amanda can stay in a hotel." Diane set down the mug, Sophie's mug, with a deliberate clink. "I know you're still processing, but this family has to keep moving forward. Olivia is here. She's alive. She needs a room. And frankly, Sophie's room is the obvious choice." I noticed she didn't say Sophie's room with any softness. She said it the way you'd say the spare room or the junk closet. "When did you and Kevin arrange this?" "Last week. He called me about the apartment situation, and I suggested they come here. Marcus's house is plenty big." "This is my house, Diane." She waved her hand. "You know what I mean." "No, I mean this is literally my house. My name is on the deed. My father left it to me when he passed. Marcus moved in after our wedding, but nothing about the ownership changed." For the first time, something flickered behind her perfectly composed expression. "That's a technicality. Deeds aren't technicalities." I opened the kitchen drawer where we kept important documents and pulled out the property folder. I didn't need to show her. I knew every line on that deed by heart, but I wanted her to see the paper. Something about holding physical proof makes people take things seriously. She barely glanced at it. Marcus would never turn away his own brother. Marcus would also never let someone paint over his daughter's stars without asking. "Stepdaughter," Diane corrected, and the word landed like a slap. I went very still. "What did you just say?" She seemed to realize she'd crossed a line, but Diane was the kind of woman who doubled down instead of retreating. "I'm not saying he didn't care about Sophie. Of course he did, but Kevin is his brother, and Olivia is his blood niece. Family takes priority. Sophie was family. Sophie was your daughter from your first marriage. I'm not being cruel, Rachel. I'm being realistic. Marcus can still have biological children. He's only 36. Olivia is already here. We need to focus on the family we have, not the one we've lost. I leaned against the counter, studying her. Diane was wearing a new cashmere sweater, camel-colored, probably $400. Her nails were freshly done. Her hair was salon-perfect. She looked like a woman who'd come from brunch, not a woman who was overseeing the demolition of a child's memorial. "Let me ask you something," I said. "When did Kevin's renovation start?" "What do you mean?" "The renovation. On his house. When did it start?" "A few weeks ago. The kitchen needed a complete overhaul, and then they found mold in the mimia." "Kevin doesn't own a house, Diane." Her coffee cup paused halfway to her mouth. "Kevin rents a 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street, Unit 4B. He's rented it since his divorce from Stacy." I pulled up my phone. "I know this because Marcus co-signed the lease 2 years ago, and the renewal came to our mailbox by mistake last month. There's no house. There's no renovation. He moved. He and Amanda. Amanda's Instagram shows their apartment. She posted a video of Olivia's first steps in that same apartment 3 days ago. I can see the Unit 4B number on the door in the background." I turned my phone to show her. "So there's no renovation. Which means you lied to me about why Kevin needs a room. What's the real reason?" Diane set the coffee down. The composed mask was cracking, but she tried one more angle. "They need more space. A growing family. Why here? Why not your house? You have 4 bedrooms, and you live alone. My house isn't set up for a baby. Neither is a dead child's bedroom, Diane." She flinched. "Good. Here's what I think happened," I said, keeping my voice level. "Kevin got evicted. That's why he suddenly needs a place. And instead of taking him into your own home, you decided to install him in ours. In Sophie's room specifically. Because you've been wanting that room cleared out since the funeral. That's not. You told Marcus's Aunt Linda at the repast that the room should be converted into a home office. Linda told me. You told your friend Barb at Easter that it was morbid to keep a dead child's room intact. Barb told Marcus. You've been circling that room for 8 months like a vulture. I was trying to help your husband heal. By erasing his daughter? She was not his daughter." Diane's voice rose for the first time. "She was a sweet girl, God rest her soul, but she was not a Callahan. She had her own father wherever he ran off to, and Marcus took on a responsibility that wasn't his. Now that responsibility is over, and he has a chance to start fresh. Kevin's situation is a blessing in disguise." The silence that followed was so thick the sound of the painter's rollers upstairs seemed deafening. "You planned this while I was at therapy," I said quietly. "The 1 hour a week I leave this house, and you knew exactly when it was. Don't flatter yourself. The timing was coincidental. Your GPS disagrees." I opened another app on my phone, the family location sharing Marcus had set up after Sophie got sick, so we could always find each other. Diane was on the plan because she'd insisted during Sophie's treatment, claiming she needed to know where everyone was in case of emergencies. She'd never bothered to remove herself. "You were parked outside my therapist's office at 1:47 p.m. You waited until you saw my car pull in, then you drove here. The timeline matches perfectly." For the first time, Diane looked genuinely caught. "You sat in a parking lot outside a grief counselor's office," I continued, "waiting for a mother to go inside to process her dead child's loss, so you could race to that mother's house and destroy her dead child's room. Let that sink in for a moment. You're twisting everything." "I'm reading a map." I put the phone down. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go upstairs and tell those painters to stop. You're going to call Kevin and tell him to find somewhere else to stay. And then you're going to leave my house. I'll call Marcus." "Please do." I was already dialing. "Let's call him together." Marcus picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Rach. Everything okay?" "Not exactly. Your mother is here. She hired painters to redo Sophie's room and invited Kevin to move into it." 3 seconds of silence. Then, "She did what?" "I'll let her explain. You're on speaker." Diane straightened her spine, going into performance mode. "Marcus, honey, I was just trying to help. Kevin and Amanda need a place to stay. And the room was. Don't say it was just sitting there." Marcus's voice came through the speaker low and dangerous. "Don't you dare say that, sweetheart." Is the room, did they already start?" I took a breath. "They painted over Sophie's stars. The sound Marcus made wasn't quite a word. It was the sound of something breaking inside a person. A sharp intake that turned into something between a gasp and a groan. Marcus. Those stars were just stickers. Diane tried. You can buy more. She put those up herself. His voice was barely controlled. I held her on my shoulders for 2 hours while she pressed every single one into the ceiling. She was so weak from treatment she could barely lift her arms, but she wanted it perfect. She arranged them in constellations because I taught her the names. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper. We named one after her Sophie's star. Top right corner, the big one, and she made me promise it would always be there. Always. Marcus. And you painted over it. While my wife was at therapy, grieving our daughter, she wasn't your. Finish that sentence. His voice dropped to a whisper. I dare you. Diane closed her mouth. I'm leaving the office now. I'll be there in 25 minutes. Do not let those painters touch anything else. Mom, if even one more star is gone when I get there, you will never set foot in that house again. He hung up. Diane stood frozen in my kitchen, her cashmere sweater and salon hair suddenly looking less like armor and more like costume. He's emotional, she said, mostly to herself. He'll calm down. No, I said. He won't. You don't know your own son very well, do you? I know my son better than anyone. Then you'd know that Sophie called him daddy on the 3rd date. I watched her face as I said it. She was 4. Her biological father left before she turned 2, and she'd never had anyone to call daddy. Marcus took her to the park, pushed her on the swings, and she looked up at him and said, Are you my daddy now? And Marcus, your son, whom you claim to know so well, looked at a 4-year-old girl who wasn't his blood, and said, If you'll let me be. Diane's jaw tightened. He adopted her officially 6 months after we got married. Legal, binding adoption. Sophie Callahan. It's on her birth certificate, her medical records, and her headstone. So when you say she wasn't his daughter, you're not just being heartless. You're being factually wrong. I walked past her and headed upstairs. The painters had finished one wall. The deep navy blue that Sophie had picked out herself was now a flat, lifeless white. The glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling were half covered. I could still see the faint outline of Orion beneath the primer. Ghost constellations fading under someone else's idea of what this room should be. Stop, I told the painters. We're done here. They looked at each other, then at me, then toward the stairs where Diane was hovering. She hired you? I asked. Yes, ma'am. This is my house. She doesn't live here, and she didn't have authorization to hire anyone to work in my home. I need you to stop and pack up. The older painter nodded slowly. We'll need payment for the hours already worked. Send the invoice to Diane Callahan. I gave them her address. She's the one who contracted you. They started packing without argument. Smart men. I stood in the middle of Sophie's half-destroyed room, looking at the wall where her growth chart used to be. She'd only made it to 3 feet, 9 inches, the last measurement Marcus took on her 7th birthday, 2 months before the diagnosis. The pencil marks were gone now, buried under primer. On her dresser, untouched only because the painters hadn't gotten to that wall yet, sat the snow globe Marcus had given her after her first chemo session. Inside, it was a tiny ice skating girl, and Sophie had named her Future Me because she said when she got better, she was going to learn to ice skate. She never did. I picked it up and shook it, watching the glitter snow fall around Future Me. That's when I heard Kevin's voice downstairs. Mom, Rachel's car is here. I thought you said she'd be gone, until... He stopped when he saw me coming down the stairs, holding the snow globe. Kevin looked guilty. That was the difference between him and Diane. He had the decency to look like he knew what he was doing was wrong. Rachel. Hey. Your apartment's fine, Kevin. I know there's no renovation. He shot a look at his mother. Mom, you said you'd talk to Marcus about this. I handled it, Diane said tightly. You handled nothing. Marcus is on his way home, and he's furious. I suggest you both be gone before he gets here. Kevin ran his hand through his hair. Look, I got behind on rent. It's just a temporary thing. I'm starting this consulting business, and that's between you and your landlord. It's not between you and my daughter's bedroom. I didn't ask for Sophie's room specifically, he said quickly. Mom said you had a spare room that wasn't being used. And you didn't think to ask which room? Or to call Marcus? Or to call me? He had no answer for that. What about Amanda? I asked. Does she know how this room became available? Kevin's silence told me everything. Amanda didn't know. Amanda probably thought this was a normal guest room, not a dead child's sanctuary that her mother-in-law had gutted while the grieving mother was at therapy. Kevin, take your mother and go. Amanda is welcome to call me if she wants the full story. Rachel, please. Just. The room was painted over. Sophie's stars are gone. I held up the snow globe. This is the only thing in that room that wasn't touched. The growth chart is gone. The night sky she built with her father is gone. So no, I'm not going to please just anything right now. The sound of Marcus's truck, pulling in fast, made all three of us turn toward the door. He didn't park so much as stop the vehicle, leaving it running as he slammed the door and came up the walkway with the long, purposeful stride of a man who'd spent 25 minutes turning grief into fury. He walked past Kevin without a word. He walked past Diane without a glance. He went straight upstairs. We all stood there, listening to his footsteps cross the hallway, enter Sophie's room, and stop. The silence lasted about 10 seconds. Then I heard him say, very quietly, "Oh, God." I went upstairs. He was standing in the center of the room, looking at the white ceiling where Sophie's galaxy used to be. His hands were at his sides, fists clenched so tight his knuckles were bone white. I can still see them, he said, pointing to a corner where the primer was thinnest. There's Cassiopeia. And there that was Sophie's star. We can put them back. It won't be the same. She placed everyone. He touched the ceiling where the big star had been, the one they'd named after her. She stood on my shoulders and pressed it right here and said, "This one's the brightest because it's me." I put my hand on his back. I know. He turned around. His eyes were red but dry. The tears would come later, in private, the way they always did with Marcus. Where's my mother? Downstairs. With Kevin. He nodded once and went down. I followed. Diane had arranged herself on the living room sofa, legs crossed, posture perfect, like she was waiting for a board meeting. Kevin stood by the door, looking like he wanted to bolt. "Kevin," Marcus said. "Go." "Mark, I didn't know about the room." Mom said. "I know. Go. We'll talk later. This isn't about you right now." Kevin left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch sounded like a judge's gavel. Marcus turned to his mother. "Tell me what you said to Rachel about Sophie." Diane's eyes darted to me. "Your wife is overreacting. She said Sophie wasn't your daughter," I said flatly. She said it multiple times. She said Sophie wasn't a Callahan, that she had her own father, and that now the responsibility was over. Marcus stared at his mother. Responsibility. I didn't use that word exactly. You used exactly that word, I said. Sophie called me Dad. Marcus's voice was eerily calm. She made me Father's Day cards. She drew pictures of our family, me, Rachel, Sophie, and the dog, and put them on the fridge. She introduced me to her friends as her dad. When the doctors told us the leukemia was back, she held my hand and said, "It's okay, Daddy. I'll fight it again." She was 7 years old. Diane opened her mouth. Marcus held up one hand. When she was in the hospital for the last time, she asked me to put the stars on her ceiling, so she wouldn't miss them. I bought glow-in-the-dark stars from the gift shop and stuck them on the ceiling above her hospital bed. The nurses helped me. And the last night, Mom, she looked up at those stars and said, "Look, Daddy, we're sleeping outside together." And then she closed her eyes. His voice cracked on the last word, and he paused, breathing through it. Those stars on her ceiling at home were the last thing she was proud of. The last normal, happy thing she did before everything went bad for the final time. And you covered them with paint, Marcus. I didn't know the stars were. You didn't ask. He cut her off. You didn't ask because you didn't care. You never visited Sophie in the hospital after the first week. You never learned her favorite color navy blue, like the night sky, which is why her room was that color. You never once said, "My granddaughter." Not once. I listened for it. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every birthday, you always said, "Marcus's stepdaughter," or "the little girl," or just her. That's not fair. And now you've erased her room to put in your other grandchild, the real one, right? The blood one. Because that's what this is about. It was always about blood with you. Diane stood up, reaching for the dignity card. Family is about legacy. Marcus. I won't apologize for wanting my bloodline to continue. Your bloodline. Marcus laughed, and it was the most joyless sound I'd ever heard. Let's talk about your bloodline. Let's talk about Kevin. Something shifted in Diane's expression. What about Kevin? I co-signed Kevin's lease, Mom, which means I get the correspondence from his landlord, including the eviction notice he received 2 months ago. Marcus pulled out his phone. 4. Non-payment of rent. 8 months of non-payment. To be exact, 8 months. That's almost exactly how long Dad's been gone. Their father, Gerald, had passed away 10 months ago. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. He'd left behind a modest estate, the house, some savings, a life insurance policy. Diane had been named executor. Where's Kevin's inheritance, Mom? Diane went very still. Dad's will split everything 3 ways, you, me, and Kevin. I got my share. Kevin told me 6 months ago that he was still waiting for his. He said you were handling the paperwork, but Kevin's broke. He can't pay rent. He doesn't have a consulting business. He's been doing DoorDash to buy diapers for Olivia. So I'll ask again, where is Kevin's share of Dad's money? The estate is complicated. There are taxes, fees. I called Dad's attorney last week. Marcus's voice was flat, factual, and devastating. The estate cleared probate 4 months ago. Kevin's share, just under $90,000, was released to the executor. To you. Diane's perfectly manicured hand gripped the arm of my sofa. You kept Kevin's inheritance. You kept your own son broke and desperate, so he'd need you. So he'd have to call you for help. Stay in your orbit, depend on you. And then you used his desperation to justify gutting my daughter's room, a problem you manufactured so you could swoop in with a solution. That money was supposed to Gerald, would have wanted me to manage. Gerald left it to Kevin. Not to you to manage. To Kevin. He would have wasted it. He always wastes money. I was protecting him. You were controlling him. Just like you're trying to control me. Just like you controlled Dad. You pushed Kevin into a corner, and then you used his crisis to get what you really wanted. Sophie's room emptied, her memory erased, and your precious bloodline grandchild installed in her place. The silence in the room was so complete I could hear the kitchen faucet dripping. I want my daughter's stars back, Marcus said quietly. I want her room restored. And I want Kevin's money in his account by Friday. Or what? Or I give this information to Kevin's divorce attorney. Or to Kevin himself. Or I just stop answering your calls for the rest of your life. Pick whichever consequence scares you most. Diane looked between us, searching for an ally, an angle, an escape route, finding none. You're choosing her over your own mother, she said, and the venom in her was unmistakable. It could have meant me. It could have meant Sophie. Probably both. I'm choosing my family, Marcus said. Rachel is my wife. Sophie is my daughter. Always. And you're the woman who painted over my little girl's stars while her mother was at grief counseling. He walked to the front door and opened it. The afternoon light flooded in, catching the dust motes stirred up by the painter's work, tiny particles of Sophie's room floating in the air. Leave. And leave that mug on the counter. It's not yours. Diane picked up her purse. At the door, she paused. I was trying to help this family move forward. No. You were trying to make this family forget. There's a difference. She walked out. Her heels clicked down the driveway, sharp and precise, the sound of a woman who still thought she was right. The Lexus started, reversed, and was gone. Marcus closed the door and leaned his forehead against it. The stars, he said. I know. She painted over Sophie's stars. We'll fix it. It won't be the same. No, I said honestly. It won't be exactly the same. But we'll make it close. We'll put Orion back. Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, and Sophie's star, top right corner, the brightest one. He turned around. His face was the face of a man trying very hard to keep it together. She asked me to promise those stars would always be there. Always. She made me pinky swear. I took his hand. Then we'll put them back. And if the glow-in-the-dark ones from the store aren't bright enough, we'll get the ceiling professionally painted. Real constellations. We'll hire an artist. Sophie would say, that's cheating. He almost smiled. Sophie would say, that's an upgrade. He did smile then. Just barely. Just enough. We went upstairs together and stood in the half-destroyed room. The primer was already drying, locking Sophie's original stars beneath a layer of white. But in the far corner, where the painters hadn't quite reached, 3 small stars still glowed, faintly remnants of her personal constellation, survivors of Diane's renovation. Marcus reached up and touched them. "Hey, Soph," he whispered. "Daddy's here. Nobody's taking your sky away." My phone buzzed. I looked down at a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Rachel. This is Amanda, Kevin's wife. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? Kevin told me everything. And there's something about the money situation you should know." Diane told Kevin the inheritance was gone, spent on Gerald's medical bills. "She's been lying to both of us." I showed the message to Marcus. He read it twice, then handed the phone back. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll deal with that tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I agreed. That night, we drove to 4 different stores before finding the same brand of glow-in-the-dark stars Sophie had used. We bought 6 packs, enough to fill the entire ceiling. Then we went home, moved the dresser to the center of the room, and Marcus stood on top of it while I read off Sophie's constellation map from the photos on my phone. We'd taken pictures of her ceiling the week she finished it, because she'd been so proud, and I'd never been more grateful for the impulse to photograph ordinary moments. Star by star, we rebuilt her sky. It wasn't identical, my hands placed them instead of hers, and the angles were slightly different, and Orion's belt was straighter than Sophie would have liked. But when we turned off the lights and lay on her bed looking up, the ceiling glowed soft green, and for just a moment, it felt like she was there. "Sophie's star," Marcus said, pointing to the top right corner. "The big one, the brightest one," I said, "because it's her." We lay there in the glow of our daughter's reconstructed galaxy, in a room that was hers, in a house that was mine, holding hands the way you do when the grief is too heavy to carry alone but just light enough to share. On Sophie's dresser, the snow globe sat where it had always been. Future me, forever skating, forever waiting for Sophie to get better. I reached over and shook it one more time. The glitter fell slowly, catching the glow of the stars above, and for a moment the whole room sparkled. Not a museum, not a shrine, a sky. Sophie's sky, in Sophie's room, held together by a father's promise and a mother's refusal to let anyone take it away. And somewhere across town, Diane sat in her 4-bedroom house alone, surrounded by all the space she'd never offered Kevin, counting money that wasn't hers, wondering why both her sons had stopped answering the phone. She'd find out soon enough. Amanda would make sure of that. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the stars were back. And that was enough.